Welcome to Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. You can find us at LCARA.net, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. If you're enjoying the videos we're producing here at LCARA, please help our club out by hitting that subscribe button. Also, give us some feedback on our videos. Click the like button, share with anybody who may find it interesting, and be sure and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified of the next video release.
Hi there, this is KY4BDP Brian for the Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. Today I'm sitting down with Jack AB4WS, and the reason I wanted to sit down with Jack is number one, passion, but number two, he's in we'll call it a parallel universe when it comes to extolling the virtues of ham radio. Jack, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Jack, I got a note from one of our club members that said, hey, you might want to listen to this podcast. And I had no idea what it was about until I actually listened. And I guess Brian, KK4KTV, had sent you some notes or something. You actually talked a little bit about our YouTube channel. But in general, that's not all that you do. What does your podcast do? And what are we talking about on your podcast?
Well, what we have is the AB4WS Radio Show. Put it out weekly, usually every Friday thereabout. It's about 5 to 10 minutes long, and it covers amateur radio news and information that is specific to the Greater Cincinnati and the state of Kentucky. Looking maybe to expand on that at some point in time. I follow what you guys do at the Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Club, and it's just awesome what you do, the YouTube channel that you do. I've dabbled a little bit in video, but most of the stuff I've done so far has been audio. But basically what I do is I, throughout the week, try to gather information specific to amateur radio news and information that would be of interest to amateurs in the Greater Cincinnati area and the entire state of Kentucky. I'm located in Big Bone, Kentucky, which is about 13 miles southwest of Cincinnati, Ohio. And it's really been unbelievable the amount of traction that the show has taken on and people have gained interest in. Some of the stuff sounds kind of mundane. There's a meeting here and at this time, or this club's involved in this activity. Some of the stuff's more exciting, like recently we had the Okayan Amateur Radio Club in Cincinnati the sponsored a group of elementary school students to be able to talk to the International Space Station.
Right.
And that's a really neat story. It spurs a lot of interest, a lot of things in there. We're able to incorporate some audio from the space station into that particular podcast, and really as well. But again, the main idea is just generate interest. Send news and information on what's happening in the amateur radio community as it relates to Greater Cincinnati and the Commonwealth of Kentucky out there to other people to be able to enjoy.
Exactly. All right, so we'll cut here.
Okay.
Is there a particular topic that Jack, what are some things on your podcast that you feel is important, that it's information that you want to convey as a part of the podcast as it relates to the amateur radio field?
Well, the biggest thing with my podcast is to communicate news and information of what's happening in amateur radio and try to spur some interest and enthusiasm in amateur radio as it relates to the geographical area of Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky.
Right.
And one of the things that I really like about what you all do, and I've thought about really expanding what I do to go along with that, is so many times I get a call from somebody where they'll say, hey, I'm having trouble with my D-Star hotspot. Can you tell me how to do it? And I may not have all the answers. I'm not a total expert, but I've got one running, and I can tell you how I can do it, and I can tell you the pitfalls that I have to try to accelerate or help them with the learning curve associated with it.
Right.
And a lot of these formats, I know we were talking today about the digital voice modes,
Right.
D-Star, DMR, Fusion. D-Star was the easiest for me to pick up. DMR was by far the most difficult. It's the most complicated. In fact, I always explain it to people. D-Star is sort of like programming an analog radio. It's a flat file database system.
Okay.
And you just put the information, the frequency, and so forth in. But D-Star is a relational database system to program. You have all these different flat file databases of information that all have to coincide and mend together in order for that radio to work on that repeater system or that hotspot.
Right.
And so it's much more complicated. And if we can do podcasts, or in your case, your YouTube channel shows to help people through that process. And to make that easier, they can watch and say, hey, the light bulb comes on, and wow, I didn't realize that. That's an easier way to do it. And then we gain traction, enthusiasm, knowledge, and we all build on what each other does.
Oh, I totally agree, because one of the things that Chris and I try to do with each of our videos, not all, but many of them, is we have a number of Elmers in the club. Well, they're great with that knowledge. What we try to do is take that knowledge, distill it down into something we can put in a video, and then say, well, now this is out there where anybody can use that. So my Elmer's knowledge is now available to anybody. You don't have to be a part of Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. You can say, well, there's a YouTube channel on how to set up a GP3 Comet antenna, or how to do a link dipole, or whatever it might be. How do you get material for your podcast?
Wow. That's the biggest challenge. Everybody says, well, and of course, when I first got into this, because I had no previous experience in doing anything like this at all, I was always interested in it, but never had done it myself. And I thought, this will be an easy task. I'm doing a 5-minute show. It's going to take me 5 minutes every day. Well, sort of like my sister's a school teacher, and so she said for years, I know from teaching classes that I did, there's like 2 or 3 hours of preparation for every hour in the classroom that you have to do. Well, doing a podcast is about the same thing. I spend hours upon hours of collecting information, then typing it into a script, than it ever takes me to record that script and put it out on the air. So basically what I do is I started out with club websites. And I tried to collect the websites of every amateur radio club in the Greater Cincinnati area and the state of Kentucky.
Right.
And I tried to visit those. And it's amazing. Some of them are really up to date. In fact, some of them, I think there's a note on one of them that I check, and I usually check most of them every week, that it has been last updated in 1985.
Yeah.
Clubs are great and everybody's well-meaning, but we all know we got that one guy that does the web page, and then something happens, or he gets involved, or he gets tied up, or he gets sick or something, and then it falls apart.
Right.
And I can tell you right now who the top 5 clubs in Greater Cincinnati and Kentucky are as far as keeping their websites up, and they're my first go-to.
Sure.
I check them every month because they got the most newest and up-to-date.
Right.
The world of social media is fantastic. I subscribe to all the Facebook rooms that there is, because Facebook, a lot of times people will post the information in Facebook and you don't see it anyplace else.
Right.
Because the people that are in tune to social media are into social media, and they'll post it on Facebook or Twitter, and that's where it is. So what I do is throughout the week, as I go through and I peruse Facebook, or I get emails and I sign up for all the listservs and the group IO groups, or anything that I think would be interesting to it, I'll check through that throughout the week. And I use an electronic notebook, and I'll copy and paste or put that stuff over into a notebook. And then when I sit down to prepare the show at the end of the week, I'll have all these lists of notes in there of things to go. And then I start coming through and I'll write my script based upon those notes in which I have, and then record my show out there and publish it out.
Absolutely.
So
and it's once a week?
Once a week, yeah.
Once a week.
Yeah.
And you were just talking about all the hours that goes into it, and Chris and I were, KY4CKP, he and I were tallying up our hours so that we could submit those for club-based hours. And this last month, I went down to Hamcation down to Florida, and I did a bunch of videos and all this stuff. Well, in a month, I had close to 80 hours. And I think, we don't expect everybody to put in 80 hours. This is something we're passionate about, but it's, if you don't actually track your time, it's amazing how much time you can put into this.
And the way I do it merged into other things in which I'm doing. So I'm not as detail conscious as far as tracking my time. If I did, I'd probably sit back and say, if somebody said to me that I have an obsessive amount of hotspots and handheld radios, and I'm probably obsessive amount of time that I spend into doing it. But it really has filled a void in which there really isn't anything else out there to do it. And I've just been amazed at the traction, the comments, the calls. I'll go someplace and somebody say, AB4WS, I listen to your show. That's the neatest thing going. I'm a new ham, and I really like that. And I'm sure you guys. I mean, I watch your videos, and I mean, it's phenomenal. And there's a lot of great YouTube content on the web out there in which you can learn so many different things and do so many different things. And I've had friends for years, I got a kitchen sink problem. What do? Oh, you go to YouTube. Well, people that are interested in amateur radio, we're talking about before at the meeting about getting youth and young people involved.
Right.
That's how the young people are going to learn about the
That's
hobby of
how they do it.
amateur radio. And what you guys are doing as far as from a new ham perspective and sharing the knowledge and how to get involved and the enthusiasm and interest for doing something.
Right.
A lot of this stuff came naturally from me. I'm a ham from the first licensed in the late 70s. My first exposure to radio and I didn't know any ham radio operators growing up. Ham radio was totally foreign to me. I had a little black battery operated transistor radio with an earphone, and I was marveled at the fact that at nights, it seemed like Sunday nights, I'd be listening to the Boston Bruins hockey game on an AM station in the New England area,
right.
With my earphone. And my mom would say, "Go to bed, you need to turn that radio off," and you turn it off. And then, of course, as I got interested in public safety, a scanner, and became involved in scanner, and for a long time wrote columns for a number of different scanner publications and scanner groups, the All Ohio Scanner Club. Did a column for them, and the several other nationwide scanner, in which I did scanner listings and radio monitoring in that.
Right.
And of course, got my ham license when I was in college, had met some other hams, and been addicted more or less ever since. Back in those days, we didn't have YouTube. You had a question, you had to find somebody that had the knowledge about it, or you had to go to the library and find a book that was most of the time out of date to do it.
True.
Today, these kids really live in a world in which there's a lot of information out there. And what you guys are doing with the YouTube channel is phenomenal, as far as giving them ideas of what's involved in amateur radio, how to do it, how to find it, how to link up with other people that are involved in it, how to communicate. The guys here at D-Star, over half of these guys I've talked to a considerable amount of time.
Right.
And over half of them I had never met physically until today. And so it really opens our whole world up to us. Ham radio, the original social network.
And I say all the time, ham radio, the original maker hobby. One of the most original maker
exactly.
hobbies.
Everything involved in maker today is amateur radio. I go back to the time where people talk on their cell phone, and I always like to comment, like to my son and friends of his and my grandkids and friends of theirs. They'll be on the cell phone. I said, how you can make a phone call on a cell phone? Well, where that comes from? It comes from us guys back in the 80s with 2-meter handhelds and phone patches, where we'd make, it was the neatest thing in the world. You couldn't make a phone call. You call and say, "Hello," and my wife would get, I was married at the time, my wife would get so aggravated. "You got me on that radio thing, don't you hang up," and you do it just to, wow, that's neat, and the wow factor.
Yep.
Yes, it was good in an emergency. You could make a call, but you didn't have cell phones then. Now everybody's got a cell phone.
Right.
But the reason that came about was from the technology that was developed really by amateur radio.
I totally agree. Jack, we'll just wrap it up today. We just wanted a quick sit down with you and tell the audience, how do we get access to your podcast?
Well, the podcast is called the AB4WS Radio Show, and it's available on most of your podcast applications. It's published through iTunes and any of the other podcast applications for a number of different things. If you find one that it isn't on, shoot me an email at ab4ws.radio@gmail.com, and we'll try to get that in, or it's on Spreaker, SPREAKER.com.
Awesome. These regional podcasts and even a YouTube channel, although with podcasts and YouTube channels today, they can be more global in reach, but these regional podcasts where you can meet the people that are watching your videos, listening to your podcast, I think it makes it more personal sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Well, it provides a real service. The days of, how many clubs really do a newsletter anymore, and some of them have gone to electronic newsletter, and half the time people don't really read it. Well, I try to subscribe to all those newsletters, and I go through and read it, and things that I think of interest, I try to put out there. And so it helps generate interest in clubs as well.
Right.
And it reminds all of us that the clubs are out there, what their purpose are, what their needs are, as far as contribution for dues and other things, and the problems and things that they're having with the repeaters going down and the cost of having those things upkeep.
Yeah.
A lot of times we as the operators forget that there's a whole infrastructure out there that relies on somebody that's funding these things, to enabling us to do that.
Yep.
And it really helps, I think, the whole hobby overall as a result.
For KY4 CKP behind the camera, I'm KY4 Brian.
And AB4WS, Jack.
Great to have you all. 73.
73.